Okay, so hopefully this is getting fed onto the Google screencast, but I just wanted to run through what this is first. So aggiedown is essentially a way to, it's built on bookdown, which is the original package that sort of this all stemmed out of. And bookdown is written by the same guy who has done a lot of stuff in R, in particular with RMarkdown. And so like the knitter package, he has a really cool slide, which these slides are actually built with Zernigin package. There's a link at the end of the slide presentation. So if you're interested in doing slide presentations, it's really nice as well. Anyway, it started with a few folks used the bookdown package to make a dissertation, a template, right? And you can write all your dissertation in RMarkdown, stitch it together, and it formats exactly in a very nice PDF how you want it to be formatted, or to meet the expectations of whatever campus you're on. And so it started with, you know, a few different people, and then it sort of has spread all over the place. And it's really, I would say, this is most helpful for folks who are planning to have, you know, do figures in R, use R. You're sort of comfortable with RMarkdown or RStudio. You don't actually have to use RStudio to do that, to make it work, but I would say it's a much easier path if you do. And it certainly eliminates the hassle. So I just submitted my dissertation this last fall or end of the summer. And interestingly, all the UCs are not uniform in how they want dissertations formatted, which is just terrible. And actually, even within the state, Cal State universities, it's also a little different. So everybody decides they want their own template, which is terrible when you're actually trying to go through this and people are like, doing this in Word or whatever you're using. And so one of the whole goals of this was to sort of take that abstraction away, and so you can focus on writing and coding and whatever it is, and then you just click a button and it knits it in the right format, right? And I would say that once I got this all set up, I was able to do that successfully, and it was awesome because it was a really nice sort of visual thing to be coding or writing, click knit, and then you see your progress, right? Like, I got through a paragraph today. Which turns out to be really hard sometimes to sort of make progress. So be kind to yourselves as far as that goes. And so you can then send out, you can send updated PDFs to folks, to your committee. Some people want a Word that you have to do track changes in. And so, if you need to paste it into something, you can, but this worked for me. I don't have a design or anything, but maybe one day if this actually works for a majority of folks, then we can do that. And so pretty cool. I just want to mention to start, it seems pretty simple, but a number of issues have popped up with folks using older versions of R in RStudio. So I would start there. I'm using the most recent 3.5.2 R and RStudio version. So if you're not updated, definitely do that. If you're running into issues. And then the next step is really to walk through the README. So the README has pretty much all the information, and I'm going to switch over to that now, that we're going to need. With the exception of, there are some, under the hood, what this is doing is actually using some interpreter that's pulling sort of a LaTeX or MikTeX or MacTeX or TinyTeX, whatever flavor you're using. It's using that to sort of interpret the RMarkdown and put it into this PDF format, right? And that's what RMarkdown is doing generally, is actually interpreting your code and or your writing and formatting it into either an HTML or a PDF or a Word doc for you. And so under the hood, what I did and spent a lot of time on was sort of the LaTeX template to match UC Davis's official format. So that, and then when you click knit, it makes it look, how we need it to look. So let's go, I'm gonna walk over to the README here. And we're gonna, so this is the GitHub repository that everything lives in. And it hopefully sort of gives some of the background behind where this came from. And it was pretty neat, actually. They had a bookdown contest, which I was tempted to enter. and just didn't have time because I was actually focusing on finishing my dissertation. But the winner, it was interesting. So he said, hey, submit anything you have, doesn't really matter. And he'll sort of give a free book or something like that. And so what was cool is I didn't even know that somebody sent this to me, because when he announced it, suddenly he was like, before I announce the winners, let me share a nice graph to illustrate the purpose of this contest. And he mentions the aggiedown for what I have no idea. But the reason being is this was his whole goal, is he wanted to see this get used, right? And he was so excited to see it started with this guy, Ishmael, who wrote this thesis down package. And then you can see everybody's forked it. It's changed into like Husky down, and then Gaucho down, and then here's Aggie down, right? Like many, many levels down. And there's a whole bunch of other downs now too. And so it's pretty neat that this has like become a viable way to actually do stuff. And it's really well supported, which is nice. So the first step is to sort of walk through this README, right? So initial setup is, if you can get tiny text to install and it works with that, I would recommend this, because this is a much smaller, if you've had to try to install the other LaTeX packages, they're ginormous. They're like over 1 gig, and it will take a while, and that's fine. But if you can use this one, it only pulls the little pieces that you need. And so it's actually a much more lightweight, nice option. So I would try to use that. And then I mentioned that if that doesn't work, you can try to uninstall it and then put one of the full installs on. And then the PDF format does require these fonts, which some folks, this is a little bit easier to do on a Mac or a Linux-based computer than a Windows, unfortunately. You can pull it. It's basically, these fonts are already part of this repository, so you can just go download them, use this code in Linux or on a Mac in your terminal. You can use this brew command to go get the fonts and install them. On Windows, you can still pull these fonts, so you go download them, you have to unzip them, and then you have to manually go find the fonts directory on your Windows computer and copy them into that. And I know with Windows 7 and Windows 10, there might be a few little differences.
So it's just a directory called fonts in your users?
Yeah, and it should be, but I think you need to have admin rights to put it in there to make it like sort of globally available. But I believe that's how you do that. So I would be interested if folks are having trouble with that, or if it's not installing and you haven't been able to do the fonts thing, maybe it's related. I'm not sure. Have you tried that? It worked? Okay, cool.
I could use that.
Okay. So then the next step is to go install this package. And I'm going to show you how I do it on the Mac right now. And obviously I wrote it on this, so it works, and I'm still somewhat of a novice of writing packages, which is why it's probably breaking on other people's computers. So this requires a thing called DevTools, which is a package that allows you to build packages or install things from a lot of different things, but GitHub in particular. And so it also requires bookdown. And so what this command is doing is saying, hey, if you don't have DevTools, go get DevTools, because we're going to need it. Then make sure that you have bookdown, and then go install aggiedown. And so if I go, now obviously this is already on my computer, so it won't run quite the same as other folks. But if I run this, it's going to go check for bookdown, which I already have, and then it's going to install aggiedown. For some folks, this might take a little longer than others. This is, if you get these messages, which would you like to update, you need to enter the number and enter. It's kind of tricky, especially if there's multiple numbers. You're not really sure which one to enter, but it's just saying there's been an update for the use this package, which actually might be one of the things that people are running into. They've been updating a number of things lately that the package requires. All right, so that installed. It was pretty quick. For other folks, it may not be so quick, but now we have aggiedown. And then to move forward, let's go back over to our the README, and I walk through. Now we're at step 3, and this is the part essentially that you're going to make your whatever your template or wherever you want your dissertation to live. You're going to go ahead and make that. And so we're going to make an RMarkdown. We're going to open File, New File, and RMarkdown. And then we're going to go down to Templates. You'll note here I've got a bunch of other templates that you can go grab. These are all things that I've downloaded when I was trying to play around with different templates. But there's a bunch. And these are all, what's cool is these are all RMarkdown templates. And so you'll notice there's actual journal templates. So there's a PNAS template, there's Springer journal articles. If you're interested in doing submissions this way, it's actually been much more streamlined and supported, which is actually pretty cool. But I'm going to click the UCD dissertation. And this is the most important part. You need to change the name to index. Okay. The reason is not totally clear at the moment, but it's basically looking for an index file when you click knit, and if that doesn't exist, it will break. So all lowercase index is what we're going to name that. Index. And I'm going to put this in somewhere I can find it. It's going to basically create a standalone folder. So let's make this test aggiedown folder. Okay. So it's going to live there. I'm going to click OK. And then suddenly something pops up. And you'll notice that it has, this is the template. This is what you're going to go in and change. And this is an index.rmd. Okay. If we, let's go look in the folder where I just saved this. Oh, I didn't put this in an R project, which I would recommend doing, but let's go find wherever that went. Teaching. Index, okay. So notice now there's a folder named index. And inside of that, there's a whole bunch of files, okay? You don't need to worry about most of these, but some of them are going to be important. In particular, you have a file for each chapter, an RMarkdown file for each chapter. You can have a special one for a conclusion, appendix, bullet point, references, and even an intro, okay? Each of those you can edit as you like. You can click knit. It'll sort of basically stitch all of these together into one big file, okay? It also provides you with a template PDF. So if you kind of want to see what this looks like, this is the template that it's building things off of. And we're going to go ahead and knit one so you can see it in a second. And then this YAML, this bookdown.yml file, which is what we're going to look at in just a second as well. So let's switch back to R. I just want you all to see there's a whole bunch of files, right? So this is the index. And let's go to that folder that we were in. And let's open the bookdown YAML. So what you'll see, and this is something that you can change, right? So if you have more chapters than 3 or 4, or Lord knows more, hopefully not, but maybe you do, you can add them here, right? So each of these would correspond to a file name. You would just put that in here, and it will go get them and stitch them all together for you. And then it keeps all the page numbering, it sorts that out for you. Currently, it gives you some of these options. I wouldn't mess with these. It has EPUB and docx options, but it's not, I wouldn't trust those at this point because this is still, it's mainly for the PDF. Down the road, maybe I'll get around to fussing with those more to get them to work. And then it has if you want to change your sort of chapter header to be, just ch dot or something else, you can use that there. The rest of these you can sort of leave as is, but this is where you would want to add if you had additional chapters or you wanted to drop something out of that, like you don't need an intro that's separate of your chapters, whatever it is, that this is the sort of the skeleton framework that it's using to stitch everything together. Okay, and then the index is sort of the essentially all the other stuff, the cover page, your sort of abstract, the committee signature page. This is the stuff that you would want to futz with to get the to get it to have all the information that you want on the cover parts. Okay, and then it has a bunch of other information down here, in particular bibliography. So you can use a .bib file. I used Zotero, and it was great. Worked really well with RMarkdown, as well as a CITR package, CITR, which I'll mention. And those two things together made it really easy to add citations inside the RMarkdowns. And then it has a few other options. You can add a specific file for how you want to format your citations. So imagine you're submitting to a journal. You could actually have a specific format. You can go download these files for whatever journal or format you want. And so you can change those as well. Say if your committee or somebody wants a specific format. So UC Davis actually doesn't require, they sort of have these general guidelines like, yes, you should have citations, and yes, they should be formatted consistently, but it doesn't actually say what that might be. So that is up to you. I used an ecology format, but you can use whatever you'd like. Okay, so that's that. You'll see here there's a dedication and acknowledgements. You can just keep typing, other acknowledgements. I do want to point out one thing that I have my RStudio set to. Let me show you. Under global options and in the general section, I think or is it code? Code. So soft wrap R source files is clicked. So what's happening, if you notice here, this is line 19, and then there's a whole big gap. This is all one line, and it's just in here when I'm looking at it, it's actually just soft wrapping it. So if I unclick this, let's just look at that so you can see it. It may not even, I guess it doesn't change anything. But I just want you to know this is one single line. So I have not hit enter at like the ends of these lines. I just typed all the way out, and that is important because hard sort of enter breaks will sort of tell it to do different things. So if you need to double check that sometimes, an extra space or a hard enter can actually change or break it. So, which is a little annoying, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Your chair, you can actually add additional signatures if you have lots of other committee folks. And then the titles, all of these fields are required. So for UC Davis, you need to have your program, your campus, what type of dissertation. So if you're doing a master's thesis, you could change that, and the degree, et cetera. So all those are sort of important and required by the UC Davis template. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and look at a intro and chapter so you can get a sense of that. You'll notice these comments here with a little, those are sort of, they're ignored. So you can add comments to yourself that are just sort of, just like regular comments in R, but they're not going to be rendered. So it's nice to sort of handily say like, oh, I put this in here because it does this, and you can add a little comment here. It has to start with that little caret, exclamation, dash, dash, and it has to end with a dash, dash, caret the other way. But if you have those, it's handy. You can add notes to yourself inside the RMarkdown, and they won't get rendered. Similar to RMarkdown, if you haven't used it, section headers start with pounds and different number or hash, depending on how many you use, it's different levels. These are like bookmarks in a sense, or like links, right? So this will link back to, so you can flip between sections in the PDF, which is nice. And you'll see some other things in here that are along these lines for little bookmarks or hyperlinks, essentially. And then this is, this is just telling you how, what you would do in RMarkdown, how to use RMarkdown. And then some other things in here. It's just an example, right? So here's an intro. Let's look at the chapter. Notice now we have something new. We have a chapter mark, and then this is the name of the chapter. And this is something you can add. You can tweak it as you like. Lists. You can go through these and use them as you like. There's a lot of really good resources on using RMarkdown, and in particular within the bookdown framework. This is a code chunk. So this is where you would put your tables or your figures or whatever it is that you're interested in. Typically, you want to use them inside code chunks because it gives you more flexibility. You can use formulas pretty easily, or even inline text or code to interpret things. And I know I'm flying through that. There's a plot. We're going to look at this, what this actually looks like in a second. But there's a whole bunch of information. Each chapter sort of has its own different little bits, right? So here's this chapter was a template for somebody who does a lot of math. So it has some nice information on how to use formulas and specifics on how to format those things. So you can look at that. There's a conclusion appendix, excuse me, here. So there's a whole bunch of different files, right? But what I want you to see is when we actually get to the point where, like, okay, we want to do something, we want to knit this together, I'm going to go to the index. Remember this index? This is the one that we're going to want to click knit. Now, the first time you do this, it's going to go fairly slowly because it's going and sort of building all the packages that are required to stitch this together. For me, I think I should have all these, so it shouldn't take too long. But you'll notice over here that there's an RMarkdown tab that's now flipping through all of these different pieces. And since this is the template, it's not super complicated or long, which is nice. But now we get a formatted PDF, right? And so this is the exact format that they need for the UC Davis dissertations. You can have a copyright page if you want or not. That is up to you to decide. You'll notice the page numbering is Roman numerals until you get to your start of your first chapter. There's a sort of a dedication. Acknowledgements can be as long as you like. Abstract, which is required and it needs to be formatted exactly like this. It is what it is. And here's the really cool part. So remember those links I was talking about, those little squiggly brackets? This is what's nice, is that it's actually using those, that you can flip between sections. Notice if I hover on these are all hyperlinked, okay? So if somebody got your PDF, it's really nice. They can flip around and see exactly, it'll take me right to those places, right? And even more so if I want to go look at the figure, I can do that, okay? Inside the chapter, I wonder if this has any citations. Oh, here's a figure that's hyperlinked, right? So inside the actual, it'll take me to that figure, so vice versa. And let's see if we can find a citation somewhere. But you can see, these are nicely formatted, really complicated formulas. The figures, the code, if you want to print out your code. Tables look really nice. There's some, I'm going to mention a few things in a second on how to format your tables. There are citations in here somewhere. I need to find one.
Do you always have to knit from the index page, or could you knit like a single chapter?
I think you can knit a single chapter. And so one actually thing on the, let me flip back to the README on the GitHub webpage. So that's kind of the overview, okay? And this is how to use it if you're not in RStudio. You would use this line of code. But one of the nice things you can do is actually you could have an entirely separate project with just one chapter, right? Your chapter 1 is in its own little project. You have an RMarkdown you've been formatting. What you can do is actually use that as sort of this knit child option. And so this example is like, here's a dissertation that has 3 chapters. Each chapter is in its own project and its own folder on the computer. And inside that folder is all the data, the code, for that paper, right? If we're all writing a chapter as a paper. And what's neat is when you get to the the RMarkdown or the aggiedown package for this chapter, they put the title of the chapter, the sort of short title, and then this is it. It's basically saying, go get this RMarkdown and use that in its place. So which is nice, you don't have to be sort of like, because it gets really big really quick, right? If you have all your chapters in one place and you're making edits, and it can get complicated. So this is a nice way to sort of keep them discrete, and you can keep the mess siloed in its own place. So yeah, you can definitely do that on its own. And then, yeah, if you want to render the whole thing, I think you do need to do the index. And then there's some details which we just went through on how to format your bibliography, your style. Figure and data are folders that you would put the necessary information in to knit things together. And then a bunch of other projects and links here that you might want to check out if you're interested in seeing other tips and tricks for how to use RMarkdown. And I want to flip back to the slides. Did I already lose that? Nope. Hang on a second. I have a few other slides that I did want to show. I guess I close it. So yeah, getting started, a bad frog pun. Focusing on the writing. This was really good. I was building this as I was using it, so I had a very different experience hopefully than you will, because I was sort of going back and forth tweaking it to make it fit the format and make it look right. And that's why I'm hoping that more people, if they use it, we can make this something that is actually semi-useful and simple to use. A few packages that came in handy I want to mention. These are inside the template as well. Cable Extra was awesome and is awesome for formatting tables, either HTML or PDF. So keep that in mind. He has a really nice vignette that's linked here. So I'll send these slides around to the listserv so that everybody can have them. But if you go look, you can see he has a bunch of examples.
These are included in the aggiedown install, or no?
I don't know. I don't think that one is, but I'm not sure, actually. The knitter include graphics option, which I'm going to give an example of. This Zev has a really nice blog that runs down how to use, this is basically for images or figures, on how to use that, as well as the Yuhi's web book, which is on Bookdown. And then Cider package is what I used in RMarkdown. It's super easy to use, really handy. Click on it, it links to a Zotero library. And then you literally, just like you were using any citation manager, you just type in what citation you want, and it automatically puts it into your RMarkdown for you, and then formats the bibliography how you want it to fit. And then these two packages are awesome for cowplot and patchwork. Both do sort of the same thing for formatting like multifaceted figures. So say you made all your figures in ggplot, right? And you want to now have like A, B, C, and then like one long one down here. And instead of going and manually doing that in whatever program you have to do that with, these packages make that really easy, where you can say, I want this one, this one, this one to be the top. I want them to be 2/3, and this one to be 1/3. They're amazing, and they allow also for you to add things like A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. You know, the lettering on your panel. You can play around with legends and stuff, where you can pull the legend off 3 and put it on 1. All kinds of really nice stuff. And the guy who wrote Cowplot actually has a really awesome book out on visualization in R, which is also really nice. And here's a custom caption example. This is one thing I found that was really nice. Sometimes in the captions you want to have, you know, a formula or italics or something that's sort of like custom, right? And that's a little harder to do inside an R chunk of code. And the workaround for this is actually really simple and nice. And basically in your actual RMarkdown, you use this little reference tag in front of your caption. So I would just be typing, you know, right above wherever my code chunk is, I would just put this in here. And this is my caption. This is what I want to be my caption. And then this, I need to keep track of that because when I go to my code chunk right here, here's my figure, results as is, some other options here. But you'll notice, whoa, sorry. We went all the way back to the beginning. Trying to do this. There we go. In one of the options is figure cat. Normally you could type in whatever you want in that, right, in quotations. But if you have special formatting, it won't work. It doesn't render the same way. So to get around that, you can just reference your text. That's right here, which you can do whatever you can do in Markdown or RMarkdown right there. And then the nice thing is it will pull that into when it renders your figure, it'll add that right in for you, which is really handy. And then here's the include graphics and figure, right? You can use PDF, PNG, JPEG, TIFF, whatever you want. I use PDF because it's pretty stable and really good resolution generally, but it'll work with whatever. Yeah, Martha.
Yeah, do you put so that the text in the RMarkdown, is that like included just like directly below your code chunk with your figure, or is that
right above?
Right above.
It actually could be anywhere above the chunk.
That's okay.
Yeah, but it could be. I mean, it's basically when it renders, it's not gonna do anything with this. Right. It's not gonna show this because it's cool. So this sort of has to be separated by a space on either side. So I like to keep it right above the figure that I'm working with, but you could potentially put it wherever you want in that document, as long as it's above it. And then that's what this, I was playing around with fun figures and yes, you had a question.
Yeah, I have never done any writing really in Markdown at all. And so I guess my biggest curiosity was about the citer and using that. And would you say it sounds to me like it's pretty similar to just using like a Word plugin?
Yep. In
that when you're ready,
yep.
sort of you access this other thing, it connects to whatever citation manager you're using. It's kind of almost an identical.
Exactly. And in fact, I could show you, let me go through these and I'll show you a quick demo of it because it's really easy to use. So that's a figure and that's how you could play. I didn't really add anything fancy in here, but you could. Okay, and that's it. And I just wanted to say those are packages that were all really crucial. And then here's a link to this if you're interested in this sort of slide presentation. Okay, so let's go to Citer. So in RStudio, there's an add-in manager. And add-ins, so the package is Citer. And there it is. Insert citations. And if I click on this, it's actually going to just pull up my bibliography. It's already found actually the bibliography connection here, which is pretty cool. But you could, so this is where you could put whatever bib library you have, right? From whatever it is and what format it is. And then the nice thing is, it will, so you can put your actual Zotero library here. But then the nice thing is I can then go over here and type in whatever citation I'm interested in. So I don't even know what I'm typing. I'm just, yeah. So you search, you click, right? And then you would, you click insert. And I have no idea where this is gonna go. And then, oh, here we go. So then this tells you sort of in parentheses or not, and you can play around with that. And then you click insert citation.
And that's for an in-text citation.
In-text citation, yeah. Let me do this actually in a place that's here. So I would go here, right? Let's do this again. Just do this one. Insert citation, and there you go. And so you don't, I mean, if you already know your little code, you can use it that way. The brackets are basically what will be turned into parentheses. So if you want an in-text without parentheses, you could take those out, and it would just give you the your author. There's a whole bunch of ways to format it. But then the nice thing is it recognizes this and automatically pulls that into my bibliography at the end of the chapter.
I have two questions.
Sure.
Can you include appendices? Like if is that I actually have not looked into formatting dissertations at all, but is that something that like UC Davis wants, like your code, or not really?
They don't. So interestingly, there's not a whole lot of guidelines on that. They do want you to sort of reference or provide information on like how you got to what you got to, but there's not really a fast, hard rule on like you must put your code here, right? So what I actually did, because I had a bunch of genomics code and stuff that I was like, I'm not going to put it in like a bajillion pages of an appendix. But what I did do is actually I had an appendix, and I said, if you want to see some of the code that went in creating or doing this, go to this GitHub repository, this public repository. So I just put a link, and that'll just live there forever, and anybody can go, and I can update that, as needed, which is nice. But I do know people that also used appendices to sort of spit out just pages and pages of tables if you had stuff like that, or a ton of figures that you didn't really want to include. So yeah, it's kind of up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second
question
was just about your workflow. Like, what did you like write your chapters in RStudio? Were you writing them in Word and copy and pasting? Would you say don't do that? Like, what do you?
I would not use Word and copy and paste, because you can actually have hidden characters in there that you won't see. And then when you paste them in, it's actually pasting these sort of formatting things. Like, for example, there's a really good example of, say you bolded something in Word, right? And then you're like, actually I don't want to bold it. You unbold it, but maybe you bolded, this part with a space, like a blank space that's actually bolded. And then when you unbolded it, you only unbolded the words of that. You now have a hidden bolded sort of formatting thing that when you actually paste that in, that comes out as shows up as an extra character. And so there's a lot of little things like that that can cause issues when you actually go to sort of this plain text formatting. So I used a plain text editor. Either I used RStudio actually a lot, which was great, because you can, so one thing you can do is, this format isn't great for writing because there's a lot of screen space being wasted. But if you notice there's a little button here, show in new window, I would pop this out and make it big and just write and like literally not look at anything else. And the nice thing is then it's all here, and I had a repository for each chapter, right? And like I could commit my changes if I did a section or whatever, and I would just do that. And then I could stitch it together how we showed earlier, where you have sort of these little orphan chapters that you stick in. But I also used, if I was just really, I didn't want to look at the code because that would distract me. I've played with a whole bunch of other text editors like Atom and what else? There's one that's like distraction. What the heck was it called? Whatever gets words on the page for you, I would recommend using and playing around with different things. But I would recommend a like plain text or Markdown savvy editor. Word is not one of them.
All right.
But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes.
So yeah, that was kind of my workflow. Is I'd work on stuff, I'd type stuff, and then again, at the end of the day, I'd render it because it was just nice to see like, all right, what did I do? And that way it was some motivation to keep going. Yeah.
Going off of Martha's question, I don't know if you had any advisors that wanted it in Word format. How did you deal with that? Because I know that mine's not.
Yeah,
Yep. So, and it's such a good and hard problem. I lucked out and I had two folks who were totally fine with me doing it in a PDF, and I would just send them the updated PDF and they would like write on that, which was awesome. But I did have one who was not going to do that. So that was the part that was less fun. But for the most part, what I ended up doing is either using a Google Doc or a Word doc, and I literally would render as a PDF and then copy and paste it in, or I would just copy and paste the text and then go through and sort. So I had sort of a working copy of a doc, but I didn't really I only updated it when everything was done. I would just paste stuff in. It wasn't. There's not really a good answer for that, unfortunately. So that's one thing to consider. There's a few nice posts where people talk about actually rendering RMarkdown into Word docs, and then how to get it back in is the tricky part. But if you Google, maybe I'll try to link them. There's a few nice ones that talk about that as a pipeline. It's possible. It's just not super easy, unfortunately. Sorry.
Copy and paste from PDF that sounds like
It works pretty well. I mean, it worked for me. You know, it wasn't ideal. I had to go kind of tweak a few things here and there. But honestly, at that point, they weren't interested in as much in the formatting and the like citations and all the pretty stuff. They just want like the text and some figures. So I was like, here you go. And I said as much. I was like, I'm not really doing this in Word, so it's not going to look nice. And that was nice to sort of just own up to that and move on. Yeah. Anybody else?
So that potential output format that was the docx output, you never attempted to render it?
No, you can. So I wouldn't say that. You can do that within a single chapter. I did not try to do that with the entire. So say this is a single chapter. If I go to knit and knit to Word, we'll see what it does. It should spit something out, but it's probably not going to look. Yeah, see, it's defaulting to PDF. So it's like, nope. But you can, it's because it's inside of this project. You can actually knit straight to a doc. It's just that formatting can get really weird. You can try it. If it's standalone, that's the nice thing is you can actually play around and have sort of a doc version that gets you most of the way there. People do it. Yeah. You had a question another question?
Sorry, another
No,
question.
totally fine.
When you're viewing the PDF, is that a PDF viewer within R?
It is. So RStudio actually it will default. I think it's in the global options. Somewhere in here, it will actually pull its own RStudio PDF viewer, but you can view it in whatever. So it's giving you. I should show you, what actually happened there. So even though it sort of rendered its own little version and showed me that preview, it actually the one I'm interested in is actually down here. It made when you're done with this all, it's going to give you this underscore book folder. And then this is this is the template that basically that it's using to sort of make it look how you want. So that's something you could tweak to make it look how you want. But then this is the actual file. So you can open that in whatever your default is or you want it to be. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Cool. All right. If there's no more questions, I will try to field some installation situations. And then, please let me know if you do have issues or something's not working. I'd love to try to make sure that it's working for everybody. You have, Jen? Okay. Yep.
This is super cool, Ryan. I'm definitely going to try to use this.
That would be awesome. I would love for people. I would love for people not to have to go through the pain of formatting a dissertation because it really sucks. And so if this takes away some of that pain, even marginally, I feel like it would be a success. So, sweet. All right.
Ooh, have you heard of people use